$9 million. That was the prize. And the price of betrayal. I was thrown out of my home, abandoned by the woman I loved, while her family, with all their power, believed they had won. But they made a fatal mistake. That prenuptial agreement, which they forced me to sign to keep me away from their fortune, became the weapon that turned the tables. The trap they built for me was the very one that consumed them. My life was always woven with the threads of simplicity. I grew up in a modest home, where the aroma of home-cooked meals and the promise of an honest future filled every corner. There was no luxury, only the dignity of hard work. After high school, my days were divided between bartending, helping out my uncle's hardware store, and finally, managing a small sporting goods shop. It was an existence without grand pretensions, but forged in truth. Then she appeared, and with her, a universe of opulence I could never have imagined. Her family inhabited a kingdom of imposing properties, gleaming vehicles, and grand parties, where wealth was not just displayed, but breathed. Her parents, figures of an almost palpable authority, exerted a subtle but absolute control. Her father, with his imposing presence, distilled comments that sounded more like veiled warnings than mere observations. Her mother, a master of silent disapproval, could make anyone shrink with a simple raised eyebrow. They were never overtly cruel, but the shadow of their judgment hung over every interaction, a cold current beneath the surface of politeness. When the marriage proposal sealed our destiny, the true face of their concern for family assets was revealed. I was seen as an intruder, an outsider threatening the lineage of their fortune, despite the years we had shared. Before we could even choose a wedding date, her father imposed a non-negotiable condition: the signing of a prenuptial agreement. I didn't have the financial means to legally fight it, and the blindness of love prevented me from seeing the trap. I convinced myself it was just a formality, a way to appease her parents' fears. Love, after all, would be the only guarantee I needed, right? The day of the signing remains etched in my memory with painful clarity. It was a warm afternoon, but the atmosphere in their immense estate was chilling. Her father slid the document across the polished wooden table, and her mother offered me coffee as if it were the most mundane of business transactions. My fiancée, the woman I loved, remained silent, a statue beside me. That hurt, but I shrugged it off, convinced that in the grand scheme of things it wouldn't matter. The document detailed that everything her family owned, properties, investments, inheritances, would remain hers. That, to me, was acceptable. I wasn't seeking their fortune. However, my eyes caught a clause, almost hidden in the middle of the text. All financial windfalls acquired during marriage, including but not limited to lottery winnings, sweepstakes, game shows, and inheritances not specifically exempted, shall be considered joint marital property. The word lottery jumped off the page. Lottery? I inquired, my voice a mere thread. She just smiled, a hurried gesture, and murmured, "It's just a formality." I felt as if I was sealing a business deal, not a marriage. But the voice of hope whispered, "Love transcends all barriers." And so I signed. 6 months after that fateful signing day, we exchanged vows in a lavish ceremony by a lake. My parents, coming from their simple world, were visibly impressed by the grandeur, but their support was unwavering. I remember the tense look on my father's face when he greeted my in-laws. He had always taught me to trust my gut, but I, blinded by love, believed it would overcome any doubts. The first couple of years of marriage passed without major turbulence. We lived in an apartment her parents had helped us secure. I diligently paid the monthly mortgage installments, although the down payment had been a gift from her father. Today, I see it wasn't a gift, but a tool of control, a golden chain. At the time, however, I naively assumed this was how wealthy families operated. Our marriage had its usual squabbles, arguments about money, occasional blowouts about her parents' constant intrusion into our lives. They would show up unannounced, bringing new furniture, changing the decor, or rearranging our living space without any consultation. My wife, with a condescending smile, minimized my frustration, labeling their attitude as helpful nature. With each intrusion, the feeling that our life was a stage where they dictated the script grew. Then came the day that rewrote our story. My wife called me, her voice choked with euphoria, announcing that she had won a fortune of $9 million in the lottery, with a ticket she bought randomly at a gas station. At first, joy flooded me. I dreamed of quitting our jobs, traveling the world, a freedom we had never known. But the euphoria quickly faded. She insisted on keeping it a secret, even from my own parents. A strange paranoia took hold of her. She spoke of properly claiming the money and meetings with lawyers I had never seen. When I asked to join her, she told me, in a tone that deeply hurt me, that I would feel out of place. I had no clue the real bombshell was yet to come. If this story is already gripping you and you feel the tension building, don't forget to like this video. It really helps the channel continue to bring narratives as intense as this one. And if you don't want to miss the next chapters of this journey and other dramatic stories, subscribe and turn on notifications. Your journey through twists and emotions is just beginning. One afternoon, I returned home exhausted from work, only to find my wife and her aunt rummaging through our drawers. The air was heavy, laden with a tension I couldn't decipher. Then, with a casualness that chilled my soul, she uttered the words that dismantled my world. "I'm filing for divorce." Then, the cold order, "Pack your bags and leave the apartment." She claimed the property was in her name. I was paralyzed. Yes, I contributed monthly to the mortgage payments, but apparently her father's initial down payment and her new fortune made me irrelevant. I felt my heart shatter. I called my father, my voice choked, barely able to articulate that I had been kicked out of my own home. It was the ultimate betrayal. But the biggest shock was yet to come. I discovered that her father had mobilized his personal attorney to shield her. The plan was clear: to push me away, to isolate the newly won millions. They wanted to sweep me under the rug, like an insignificant nuisance. It was then that the irony of fate was revealed. They had forgotten the terms of the very prenuptial agreement they forced me to sign. That document, designed to protect her family's fortune from an intruder like me, contained a clause that, instead of shielding their daughter, now turned against them. Any windfall acquired during the marriage counted as a joint asset. Suddenly, I realized that if they insisted on divorcing me right after that jackpot, they might not get to keep it all. A flame of determination ignited within me. I would not be a pawn in their game. My father, with his practical wisdom, advised me to stay calm, get a lawyer outside their social circle, and brace for a nasty fight. They had thrown down the gauntlet, treating me like a disposable nuisance. If they thought I would quietly walk away, they'd severely underestimated me. I spent the following nights under my parents' comforting roof, trying to process the avalanche of betrayal. My mother, indignant, railed about my in-laws' shamelessness. My father, though equally angry, kept a clear head and, using his network, scheduled a meeting with a family lawyer first thing in the morning. Sitting in that office, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. I described the saga: the imposed prenuptial agreement, the newly won fortune, the blindness of love, and finally, the brutal expulsion. Upon examining the document, the lawyer gave an ironic smile. "They shot themselves in the foot," he declared. "They specifically included a clause that classifies lottery winnings as marital assets, unless a judge makes some wild legal interpretation. You are entitled to a substantial portion." Those words were a balm to my soul. I had feared the prenup would lock me out, but the irony was that their fear of me claiming inherited wealth had overshadowed the possibility of a lottery scenario. My lawyer warned that it wouldn't be easy. My ex-in-laws were wealthy, well-connected, and would undoubtedly mobilize an entire legal team. But he was confident in our case, especially considering my financial contributions to the marriage and the abrupt way I was expelled from our home. The tension was suffocating. My father-in-law left menacing voicemails. My mother-in-law tried to bribe me with paltry offers, and they spread slander about me. But I refused to yield. My boss, the owner of the sporting goods shop, supported me, rebuffing my father-in-law's attempts to meddle in my employment. Friends took sides, but many applauded my resistance. With negotiations at a standstill, my lawyer acted, requesting court orders to prevent the lottery funds from being hidden or transferred. This enraged my ex-in-laws, who intensified their smear campaign, painting me as a gold digger who preyed on their innocent daughter. It stung, but I stood firm. The court date was set. My ex-wife, under her parents' protective wing, avoided any direct contact, letting her lawyers speak for her. They portrayed me as a leech who contributed nothing to the marriage. My lawyer, in turn, presented detailed financial records, proof of bill payments, and, crucially, the explicit prenup clause about windfalls. We also highlighted how I had been violently shut out of the apartment. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, ordered both sides to prepare for a more formal hearing on asset division. Nothing could have prepared me for the final showdown in court, but at least I knew the law was, ironically, on my side, thanks to the very prenup they had forced me to sign. Weeks dragged on, and the tension surrounding the upcoming hearing reached a fever pitch. My ex-wife still avoided direct contact with me, yet her lawyers bombarded mine with motions, insisting the lottery win was separate property because she purchased the ticket, ignoring the prenup language that any major windfall during marriage was marital. Meanwhile, my father-in-law tried to smear my reputation among friends and business contacts, peddling the narrative that I was a gold digger who had married into the family solely for money. During this period, I felt a swirl of frustration and unwavering motivation. If they believed they could bully me out of my rights, they were mistaken. I had documents showing how I contributed to our shared life. Utility bills, groceries, partial mortgage payments. My attorney and I pored over every detail of the prenup. He pointed out a critical sentence specifying all financial windfalls, including but not limited to lottery or game show winnings, shall be considered marital assets unless expressly designated otherwise. It was like my in-laws had left a back door open without realizing it. 1 week before the hearing, we had a preliminary status conference. My ex-wife arrived with her parents and a posse of lawyers, 4 attorneys, plus a financial advisor. They looked at me with that same air of superiority, but their expressions faltered when my lawyer calmly produced the prenup text, highlighting the exact clause about lottery proceeds. The judge listened quietly, seemed unimpressed by their attempts to dismiss it, and ordered that all substantial assets remain frozen until the main hearing. That same afternoon, my mother-in-law cornered me outside the courthouse, insisting we should talk like adults. She tried offering a lump sum even lower than before, labeling it generous for someone in my background. I refused again, telling her we'd let the judge decide. She snapped that I was destroying the family, as if I were the one who blindsided her daughter with a divorce. The hypocrisy made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. My lawyer had warned me not to engage in heated exchanges that could be twisted against me later. Behind the scenes, I was worried my in-laws might try to stash the lottery winnings in secret accounts. My lawyer, anticipating that possibility, requested court orders preventing any large transfers. We also arranged to have a forensic account ready if we suspected them of hiding funds. My father-in-law's anger flared. He left me a voicemail calling me vile, accusing me of draining the love out of his daughter's life. It was rich considering they were the ones who threw me out right after hitting the jackpot. As the hearing approached, I prepared meticulously with my attorney. We rehearsed my statement, ensuring I would appear calm and factual in court. I had copies of the prenup, receipts of the mortgage I had partially funded, and even texts showing my ex-wife acknowledging our joint bills. The lawyer recommended I keep my answers concise, but let the evidence speak. If they tried emotional theatrics, we would counter with clear documentation. On the morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse, heart pounding. My parents accompanied me for moral support, though they waited outside the courtroom. Once proceedings began, stepping in, I saw my ex-wife seated beside her father, both wearing stone-cold expressions. Her mother lingered at the back, arms folded. My father-in-law's lawyers, with their polished suits, looked confident, perhaps believing money and legal muscle could outmatch the facts. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, wasted no time. She invited each side to present arguments. My ex-wife's lead attorney tried framing me as a minor contributor who had done little more than occupy the same living space. They argued the lottery purchase was her personal transaction, done with her money. But my lawyer calmly pointed out how the prenup explicitly lumps such windfalls into marital property. And we also had bank records showing she had used our joint account card that day. When we introduced that evidence, I saw a visible tension ripple through my father-in-law's camp. The judge asked if they had any contrary documentation proving it was her personal funds. They fumbled, claiming the card was accidentally used or that it was her father's deposit in the account, but the statements clearly labeled our names, not hers alone. The judge took note, her gaze shifting to them expectantly. Finally, my ex-wife spoke. She claimed she never wanted to hurt me, that her parents pushed for divorce once the jackpot arrived to protect family assets. She stumbled over her words, admitting she felt pressured but also tried to justify it as everyone would come after us if they knew about the money. My lawyer asked if she consulted me before making these decisions. She admitted no. The judge's disapproval became palpable. By midday, it was clear the prenuptial agreement was a double-edged sword for them. The very document they had enforced to isolate their wealth now threatened to place a massive chunk of lottery winnings in my hands. The judge scheduled a subsequent hearing for final decisions, stating she was inclined to treat the lottery as a major marital asset subject to equitable distribution. Outside, my father-in-law walked past me, muttering, "This is far from over," but his confidence was definitely cracked. In the weeks leading up to the final ruling, their desperation escalated. My father-in-law's lawyers tried everything, filing motions to reconsider the prenup's wording, claiming intent hadn't been to include lottery proceeds. The judge denied these motions, pointing to the plain language. My mother-in-law tried cornering me again, warning me I'd regret it if I broke their family. I told her point blank that they had started this by kicking me out and blindsiding me with divorce. My ex-wife tried reaching out, leaving emotional voicemails saying she didn't want things to end so bitterly, that if we just came to a private arrangement, we could still salvage some relationship. I'd have considered it if they treated me fairly from the start. But after the intimidation, the lies, and the forced eviction, my trust was gone. My lawyer advised me not to engage in these back-channel talks. We had a strong legal position, no reason to settle for crumbs. Finally, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed with attorneys for both sides. My father, mother, and a few friends came to support me, seated quietly in the back. The judge took the bench, reviewed the updated filings, and allowed final statements. My father-in-law's lead lawyer tried one last gamble, painting me as some cunning opportunist who only discovered the prenup's loophole after benefiting from the family's generosity. My lawyer countered with the straightforward facts. 1. They forced me to sign the prenup. 2. It explicitly included lottery or any windfall as shared property. And 3. My father-in-law financed part of our condo, yet I contributed monthly, so it wasn't a purely separate asset either. Moreover, the swift divorce filing right after the jackpot was textbook evidence of their plan to isolate me from the winnings. The judge listened patiently, then delivered her ruling. She declared the lottery winnings clearly fell under marital assets per the prenup's language. She criticized my in-laws for trying to twist the agreement they themselves had drafted. She also found that my ex-wife's immediate eviction of me from the condo was unreasonable and that I was entitled to reimbursement for my portion of the mortgage and other marital contributions. In short, the judge set forth an order. I'd receive a substantial percentage of the lottery payout, plus reimbursement for my share in the condo. We parted ways with a finalization date set a few weeks later just to process paperwork. My father-in-law's face was thunderous. My mother-in-law looked outraged, whispering furiously to him. My ex-wife stood there, tears in her eyes, maybe from genuine regret, or maybe from anger at losing so much money. I felt a swirl of vindication and sadness. We once loved each other, but greed, parental influence, and their attempts to exploit me shattered everything. In the aftermath, their lawyers tried to propose a slightly modified settlement, likely hoping I'd accept a smaller sum to avoid further drama. My lawyer recommended we finalize the judge's ruling as is. We had no incentive to reduce it. The only concession I made was giving up all interest in the condo. I never wanted to set foot in that place again. They cut me a check for an impressive sum. Was it half the jackpot? Not exactly, but it was big enough to let me rebuild my life comfortably. Throughout it all, I realized that my in-laws, in their arrogance, believed wealth insulated them from consequences. They didn't expect me to fight back effectively. The prenuptial agreement, they insisted on, ironically became the very instrument that secured my share of the winnings. Poetic justice, if ever there was. My ex-wife, as far as I know, remains under her parents' wing. She's lost face in her social circle for the fiasco that erupted. Some mutual acquaintances told me she's struggling with guilt, but I doubt she'll ever openly admit her family's role in orchestrating this. I used part of the settlement to help my parents upgrade their home as gratitude for standing by me. Another portion I invested, and though the entire ordeal left me scarred, changing how I view trust, marriage, and money, I take comfort in knowing I stood my ground. I refused to be bullied into accepting table scraps. While it was excruciatingly painful, the final outcome felt like a triumph over tyranny. Now, free from my in-laws' manipulative grasp, I'm moving forward. I've returned to a simpler life, ironically reminiscent of my pre-marriage days, but I'm stronger, wiser, and not at all the naive man they assumed they could steamroll. If they recall anything about me, let it be that they inadvertently gave me the legal weapon to ensure I wasn't left penniless. They started the war. I finished it.